Greetings from Tokyo. This is Daisuke Beppu, and I hope you are having a really nice day today. I'd like to talk to you about some questions that I've received from some viewers. These are really interesting questions, so I thought I might share my responses to them in a video format like this. Before I continue, let me just share with you what I have seen recently. This is a rewatch, but I saw this, which is a DVD from the Criterion Collection. This is the film called Thieves Highway by a director who is called Jules Dassin. This is a fascinating film. It plays almost like a film noir, and it stars Richard Conte and Lee J. Cobb. Lee J. Cobb is a phenomenal actor, as I'm sure many of you know already. He has some connections with the Criterion Collection, obviously, but he is just, when he is on fire, he is really on fire, and he's a ball of just pure volatile energy, so raw and so filled with truth and just conviction. And Lee J. Cobb does not disappoint in this film. It's one of his great performances by far. And also Richard Conte. My goodness, Richard Conte. What a great performance he gives here. So earnest and strong and so vulnerable at the same time. And this really great story about the high stakes competition involved with the kind of fruit and greengrocers market and that industry, and in particular with a set of apples. It's a really fascinating story. And Richard Conte, in case you don't know, I think many people probably know him best as Barzini in the film The Godfather. So he is the actor who plays Barzini in The Godfather. Well, Richard Conte is a really well-regarded actor in his own right, and this is one of his great performances, Thieves Highway. So just in case you're interested. This is a DVD, so if you're not into DVDs, then perhaps this is not for you. But if you don't mind DVD, and I really think it is so much worth your time because it's a fascinating film. Anyway, for your consideration, Thieves Highway. So I'd like to share with you some of these questions, and if I may, just give you some brief responses to them. The first question I received here is from Mr. Cedric Javot. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Cedric. So, good evening. How are you doing today? I would love that you give your opinion in video, not about modern well, excuse me, let me say it again. Please give your opinion about modern American directors. David Fincher, Wes Anderson, James Gray, Christopher Nolan, though you also acknowledge that he is English, Paul Thomas Anderson, Jeff Nichols, and also European directors Steve McQueen and Nicholas Winding Refn. I think we've already talked in the comment section in one of the videos about James Gray and Jeff Nichols, so let me just briefly give you my very quick responses about these other directors. I'm very much into these directors' works. For example, David Fincher. While I haven't seen all of his works, I do really love the film Zodiac. I think that's a masterful work. And Seven. I really like that film very much. But Seven and Zodiac in particular, I think, are just so fascinating. And he's doing things with the medium of film that is, I think, pushing the envelope, so to speak, in many ways. That's just fascinating and frightening, so frightening. Wes Anderson. I admit that I jumped on the bandwagon rather late with Wes Anderson. I didn't dislike him, but I was just not necessarily a fan of his at the outset of his career. But now I really respect his work very much, immensely, in fact. Isle of Dogs, while I like it, there are some issues with that film that I have, but some of his other works that I find really compelling are, for example, Royal Tenenbaums, Darjeeling Limited, Grand Budapest Hotel, and others. I find him to be quite there is something going on there that is really truthful and really sincere, and he has a nice veneer of kind of clever touches in the way he presents characters. But there is a core of humanity there that is quite endearing in his work. I really love his work, and I can't wait to see more of his films. Christopher Nolan. Now, Christopher Nolan I really like very much. I'm a huge fan of the Batman films that he did. I think of those three films, I think I like Batman Begins the best. I really like that film. I acknowledge that there are certain flaws in the film, but I think I can forgive those flaws because the overall spectacle and the human element to the story, Bruce Wayne's story, I think is really just top-notch and well done. The Dark Knight I really like very much, and The Dark Knight Rises I like, not as much as the other two, but yeah, those two, Dark Knight and in particular Batman Begins, I think are fine works indeed. Let's see, I'll be perfectly honest, I'm not quite into The Prestige. I don't quite get why that is highly regarded. I think it's an okay film. Maybe I'm just pretty slow when it comes to that particular film. I maybe should watch it again. But another film that I saw by him that I really liked was Inception. I really like that film, Inception. I think that's just a clever film. Again, I think there are a couple of flaws with some aspects of that film, but I think for the most part they're minor. So as a spectacle and as a human story, Leonardo DiCaprio, right? Leonardo DiCaprio, excuse me. So he's in that film, and he really gives a charged performance and really compelling. I think that's I think my favorite film by him that I've seen. And then Paul Thomas Anderson. So Paul Thomas Anderson is one that I really like. I saw Hard Eight, and I was hooked. And then I saw Magnolia in the theater, and this was when I was in college. So I was amazed by Magnolia so much that I think I went back and saw that film in the theaters maybe 3 or 4 times. It's just unbelievable. And then as he progressed with his career, his films grew in a certain way, or they evolved in a certain way. There Will Be Blood, Punch Drunk Love. I just, in fact, finished watching Phantom Thread as well. So I was incredibly impressed with that film. Then you asked about, let's see, Steve McQueen and Nicholas Winding Refn. So Nicholas Winding Refn, I know his films. I haven't seen all of his films, but I haven't seen The Neon Demon either, so I'm a bit embarrassed to say that. But I like, let's see, for what are the two most, he's known, I think, for Drive, and I really like Drive, but I loved the film Only God Forgives. I really loved that film. I know it got a bit of a bashing critically, but I thought that film was just a real, uniquely bonkers film. So I really admired that film very much. It just goes just bananas and by that third act. It's just wonderful. And then Steve McQueen. So Steve McQueen, his film Hunger is just haunting. His film 12 Years a Slave is riveting. But for me, I think, of his filmography thus far, the one that really got to me, really got to me, was Shame. That was just an unforgettable watch for me. I thought that film was just mesmerizing from the first minute, and I was totally sold on Steve McQueen and his voice. Amazing. I can't wait to see more of his input. Okay, so the next question that I received is from Glenn Gerard, and Glenn asked me this question about films. What are some films that perhaps brought about a significant shift in your view of the world, or just day-to-day thinking? For me, such a film was The Matrix. I would be interested to know if you have a similar experience and to know which film or films cause the shifts and in which ways. What a fascinating question, Glenn. So thank you very much for this. Gosh, this is a pretty hard question. And I think the one that maybe created a significant shift in my thinking has to be the film Tokyo Story. Now, I saw that film for the first time when I was pretty young. Maybe I was in my early teens, and so perhaps I was a bit too young to appreciate it fully. But still, it really affected me on a kind of a raw emotional level. And specifically, it affected me in the sense that it really brought home to me the concept of death, and in particular the concept of death being unavoidable or inescapable. Death comes to all of us. And so I really found that to be quite profoundly moving, and it was very significant. When I was young, I was very fortunate in that I never had to experience death directly or closely or intimately. I was very fortunate that way in my childhood, but with that in mind, perhaps I didn't have a full or well-realized appreciation of death. But when I saw Tokyo Story, it dawned on me just how how final death is. And I don't mean this to sound morbid. I really think it was a very positive lesson for me. And so I found that to be quite a significant moment in my film watching journey. So yes, it taught me a very important lesson, and it brought home the immediacy and the effects of death on loved ones, etc. So perhaps, yes, for me, the film is the Tokyo Story. Thank you.